Donald Trump, late on Monday night, announced that he is suing the New York Times for the tidy sum of 15 billion. That's right, you heard me, billion dollars with a B. Let's go through how he announced it, and then I'm going to tell you what's really going on here. There are two things, one obvious, one slightly less obvious. All right, let me do a somewhat dramatic reading of what Trump said. This isn't all of the Truth Social post, but it's a lot of it. Today, I have the great honor of bringing a $15 billion defamation and libel lawsuit against the New York Times, one of the worst and most degenerate newspapers in the history of the country, becoming a virtual mouthpiece for the radical left Democrat Party. I view it as the single largest illegal campaign contribution ever. Their endorsement of Kamala Harris was actually put dead center on the front page of the New York Times, something heretofore unheard of, etc., etc., etc. They practice this long-term intent and pattern of abuse, which is both unacceptable and illegal. The New York Times has been allowed to freely lie, smear, and defame me for far too long, and that stops now. The suit is being brought in the great state of Florida. Thank you for your attention to this matter. Make America great again. Okay, a couple things here. So I just looked this up. The New York Times is worth like $9.6 billion. So Donald Trump is suing the New York Times for $6 billion more than they're worth. How did he arrive at this $15 billion figure? Oh, I have no idea. Second, he is suing them for defamation and libel. Now, in order to libel or defame a public figure, you have to show malice. You have to show intent, that they purposely knew things were false that they wrote about him. It's a very high bar, and it's extremely, extremely unlikely to be met. So why is he doing it? As I said, there's an obvious reason and a not so obvious reason. The obvious reason is it's good politics for him. His base hates the New York Times, and he's had some success here. He had similarly frivolous lawsuits against CBS and ABC, and their parent companies, Disney and Paramount, settled both of those lawsuits, obviously for much less money than Donald Trump wanted, but they did settle. Now, they did this not because of the merits of the case, but because they didn't want an extended lawsuit with the President of the United States, who has shown his willingness to be vengeful. Okay, so there's that. There's also the fact that he sued the Wall Street Journal over reporting on a letter that he allegedly sent to Jeffrey Epstein on Epstein's 50th birthday, which we have since gotten a copy of. It looks real, but Trump is engaged in a $10 billion lawsuit against the Wall Street Journal. So good for his politics. He thinks maybe he can get them to settle and then declare victory. And third thing is he's always extremely litigious. Okay, I mean, he always has been. He sues everybody. He always has. He views it as kind of a PR move as much as a legal move. Okay, so that's the obvious reason of why this is happening. The slightly less obvious reason, and this is more psychological, but 1,000% true. Donald Trump cares deeply what the New York Times writes and thinks about him, more so than any newspaper, cable outlet in the country, always has. The reason for it is this is his hometown newspaper. This is the paper he grew up with. The tabs, so New York Post, New York Daily News, and the New York Times are the three papers he read, he consumed. And while the tabs were always important to him, the Post and the Daily News, for sort of pushing out gossip about him and how cool he was and how sexy he was and how rich he was, the Times was and is the organization that for Trump meant gravitas, seriousness, that he had made it. If the Times covered him, he mattered. The Times was the voice of the mainstream, of the elite. And I've said this time and time again, Donald Trump has always cared deeply about what the elites and his version of the elites and the mainstream think of him. To him, the Times is the platonic ideal of the mainstream. It is why he knows reporters like Maggie Haberman and Peter Baker by name. Now, he attacks them, but again, that's sort of like pulling the hair of the girl that you like in junior high or when you're littler, probably not junior high, but when you're littler, right? It's a telltale sign of that you care deeply about them. So this is really, I think, about Trump wanting to express in his own twisted way why the Times matters so much. You don't engage in a $15 billion lawsuit against people you don't care about. You don't obsess over their coverage about people you don't care about, right? This is all about Trump cares deeply, deeply about what the New York Times thinks of him, about what they write about him, and so he sues. And maybe he thinks, well, maybe they'll settle because all these other parent companies have settled. Now, the Times has rightly dismissed this lawsuit as frivolous because it is frivolous, but we shall see how this plays out. But remember, that I think is at the core, right? This is all about when he was young and caring, making it into the New York Times. Seeing his name in the New York Times was a sign he had made it. So their criticism hurts all the more to him. It's the most sort of telling sign that he feels that he's always been on the outside looking in at what the popular, cool, rich establishment kids are doing. And this is his way of getting back at them. Simple and plain. Don't overthink it. Psychology matters always, and how we thought as a kid impacts how we think when we're a 79-year-old man who happens to be the president of the United States. All right, that's it for me. I ask you to do one thing. Hit that subscribe button. You get content like this every single day for free, and I grow as an independent news creator. Thanks, everybody. Take care.